Good morning, everybody. Today we're going to talk about implications, recommendation, the last paper of the series of papers. So reflection paper number 6 is all about recommendations. So you're going to be closing your overall case study paper with this section, which is about 2 or 3 pages and 3 strong recommendations. You're going to be acting like almost like a physician, a doctor, a communication doctor, so to speak. You are the person who is going to make some recommendations to change the communication. So you're acting like a doctor. Think like a doctor here. Recommendations basically are a natural process. It happens when you do the research, you come up with recommendations. Any kind of research that you indulge in will lead to some kind of change, some kind of difference that you want to make, right? So you had this theory to look at your case, and now you looked at your case, what's going on, what's happening here, what kind of communication was going back and forth between people. Now you have a sense of what needs to be done as a next step, right? So recommendations are almost shoulds that we need to undertake, right? Like an expert, you come up with some, based on the research, these are all grounded in research. So coming out of the data, you need to change few things. So it's like a coach's perspective, it's like a doctor's perspective, so to speak. What can be done, what should be done, what needs to be done. These are the 3 or 4 questions you need to come up with, right? So this section is really very important in terms of making a difference. What can I go back and change so that in the future things will be a little different? So what should I have done? What you can do next? What could have helped? All these questions is something that we're going to tackle here. So here we don't want to just go and do massive changes or changes which are difficult to make, but some things which we can come up with based on our analysis, based on our interpretation of the case, something that can be easily done. Now, I want you to look at your analysis, and based on your analysis, and when you're doing that, your 3 axioms that are there. You look at the theory, it should be grounded in the theory. We need to go back and reflect on how it is directly related to the theory. So your axioms, if you look at first axiom of the theory and first axiom in your analysis, there's a recommendation buried there somewhere. What could be done differently? So in your case, you're doing the social exchange theory?
Yes.
Uncertainty reduction theory, sorry. So Courtney is doing uncertainty reduction theory, and in that you would go and look at first axiom. The first axiom is information sharing, if I'm not wrong. So information sharing, you go and look at information sharing and say, maybe some things that we did not lead to a proper information sharing. So what's a recommendation that we can make to ourselves? Right? So that typically the first recommendation, you have to have 3 recommendations. And 3 recommendations will come from 3 axioms basically. And also it'll be directed towards 3 different people. The recommendations will be directed towards yourself. What I could do differently. It should be related to theory. It should be communication based. And it should be grounded into 3 different people. Right? It could not be like simple recommendations. It should be recommendations that are based in your analysis. It could not be some simple, straightforward, common recommendations. Without even doing the study, you could say, well, we could have increased our communication a little bit more. That's not a recommendation which is grounded in theory. A recommendation that specifically relates back to your theory would be, what information sharing strategies could have led to less conflicts later on, maybe, or less uncertainty down the line. So it should be a specific recommendation which you have come out, which you have arrived at after looking at your data, right? And so coming back to this question of who the recommendation should be focused on, you have to go back to your analysis. They have to come from your analysis, and it should be specific, case specific. Do not make recommendations which are general, which are out there, right? So who are the recommendations for? I was telling you, it should be, the first recommendation should be for you. As a person who is involved deeply in this case, what could I have done differently? What communication methods could I have employed for this whole case to not have any issues? So first recommendation is for yourself, and it will arrive from your axioms, as I said, one of the axioms. So think about what I need to do a little bit more differently in terms of information sharing, or in terms of building family, building a group, So your recommendation section should start with self-recommendation for yourself. Then the second one should be directed towards the person, what that other person involved in the case could do differently. So if it's a friendship situation, then what that other friend could do, what dialogues, or what you can actually go ahead and specify, take a conversation and say, if this person could have said this, things would have gone in a different way. You can actually have a conversation there too. Okay. So that's a made up conversation.
What if it's a culturally different?
Then how could you
approach it differently, or they approach it differently?
Yeah.
Okay.
Based on the research, I think now you could, even though you're from a different culture, you could still say that even if I was from that person's culture, still I could do, based on my cultural beliefs, I could have still maneuvered the conversation, maneuvered the communication in a specific direction. And that's the recommendation that I make for that other person to do. So the other person who's involved in the case, the second recommendation is for the other person. What about the last one?
Both of us.
Both. Good. Yeah. So the second recommendation could be that jointly what you could do differently.
Okay.
And this is something that is crucial. Or you could do say that what could we both have done differently if there was a different professional group involved in this? How can we apply this to a professional situation? Even though it's a friendship, it's a personal situation, but still that happens in a professional environment, then what could be done, both of us would have done differently to make the communication better? So the first recommendation is for yourself. Second recommendation is for the other person involved in the case. And the third recommendation is for both of you, but in the context of a professional scenario. Okay? And you can see how the recommendations are done on the sample papers. There are 3 or 4 sample papers that I posted earlier on. Go there. So typically 2.5 pages is the section. The whole section should be about 2.5 to 3 pages. And each recommendation should be about 2 to 3 paragraphs. Okay? That gives you a lot of, you don't have to have quotations or citations in this because this is something that you are doing. So you could, as I said, based on the theory, show how a dialogue or excerpt could be rewritten. You know, you can go back to your background or your data analysis section and then pick out a conversation and say, if this is how the conversation went, but now I recommend that a few changes in the conversation, and this is how it should go when I do it. If this happens again, I will do it different. Okay? So that's basically a few things about recommendations. This is the last section of the paper. You need to have a conclusion paragraph after the recommendations, which kind of summarizes everything. But this is a very straightforward, short paper that you need to do and come up with some innovative, novel ideas about how situation can be bettered here, right? So keep working on the whole last section of the paper and the whole draft of the paper, and then you know, from here onwards the whole paper comes together very nicely. So thank you.